Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate 101 podcast. Great to see you all this fine afternoon. For those of you guys who are tuning in for the first time, we actually created this podcast post-COVID to kind of become a watering hole for commercial real estate topics. And today we have a phenomenal guest, Logan Freeman. I've been following you for quite some time, and you just provide such great value for the brokerage community and ultimately investors and developers out there. And I thought it'd be great to have you come on and talk a little bit about your experiences in brokerage and how you can really transcend from being just a, quote unquote average broker to really become an all-star broker in your market. So Logan, it's an honor to have you on the show, and we're looking forward to the discussion.
Energized, thriving, and focused, man. Ready to bring some value. And I've been watching the show saying, man, we really need to collaborate. And so we made it happen. I'm excited about it. Two guys out there trying to make things happen. I know you guys are staying busy, and for a lot of folks in the industry right now, they're not. And we're going to talk about some strategies today to help you get busy and
Definitely.
productive.
No, for sure. And again, there's always going to be ebbs and flows in the market. So one of the best things you can do is try to be adaptable and try to find ways to continually improve what you offer to the marketplace. And I'm really excited to kind of discuss that today. So before we get started, what we typically like to do is we like to learn a little bit more about the person that's across the table from us. If you don't mind kind of sharing a little bit about your backstory, I think that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Jefferson City, Missouri. It's the capital of Missouri. Not a lot of people know that. And I kind of really illustrate Jefferson City as, if you read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, it's really kind of it's a great place to live, but it has more of that fixed mindset feel, right? It's safe, not only just, personally, but professionally, it's a safe place to be, and I think that's okay. But, I always have had this like fire or something inside of me that said, man, there's got to be more out there. And I love Jefferson City. I love all my friends and my family still there. So not talking down on it, but for me, I had more of that growth mindset, and I needed something to push me and, really fire me up. And so, I really, identified as an athlete during my growing up, and that's where I found refuge. I would say, and or I had an outlet for my energy. I have a lot of energy. Thank you to the good Lord. I do have a lot of energy, but when that's not directed in the right way, it can get you in trouble. And so I struggled early on. I really did. ADD, OCD, and my mom, man, she just poured into me. She read books. This is before the internet. She was reading books. She was taking me to different places and helped me, really target that energy into athletics. And so I played college football at the University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg. I had the opportunity after that to play a little bit for the Oakland Raiders. And when I was cut from the Oakland Raiders, I had the opportunity to continue on with the 49ers, but I just felt like, it was not really for me. And so I went back to school and I finished my master's program. Well, as an undrafted free agent, I didn't make any money in the NFL, and I didn't have a scholarship anymore. So I needed to get a job, and I needed some business experience because I had always just used my body to make money, washing dishes, cleaning floors, cooking food, baling hay. And I needed some business experience. So I found a job about an hour away from Warrensburg. And so my routine would be, at the NFL Combine, I was 335 pounds. So when I got cut, I was like, there's no reason for me to be that large anymore. And so I'd wake up at 4 a.m. I'd go work out. I get back to my house, eat, my roach infested apartment in Warrensburg, Missouri. And then I would drive to Sweet Springs, Missouri, an even smaller town. I would sit in front of an analog phone and I would dial 265 times per day, get told no, likely 100 times, and then leave 165 voicemails. I was selling data that was being scraped off of K through 12 websites, consolidated, and I would sell that data to vendors that wanted to sell to the school. So I was basically a telemarketer, right? I made the calls, I did the work, and I outsold the other 5 kind of interns or salespeople they brought on because I did the work and I wasn't worried about being told no. But what transferred in that period of time was like I transferred my body by losing 120 pounds in 6 months. And then on the way to that job, this is pre-podcast, man. I mean, Lewis Howes, John Lee Dumas, those guys were out there, but like most podcasts weren't around then. So I was listening to CDs of Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and Yeah, it was very powerful, right? Napoleon Hill was in my ear. And so I had this kind of mental transformation as well. And so I get done with that. I finished my master's program, and I had lined up a job as the youngest franchise consultant that Jimmy John's had ever hired. And so I was scheduled to get to Champaign, Illinois, go to Jimmy John school, and start becoming a franchise consultant. Well, my father had really struggled his whole life with addiction, drugs, alcohol, you name it. And he came to help me move out of my apartment. And my dad's full Native American, 6'3", 260 pounds, dunk a basketball standing underneath it, hit a golf ball 300 yards, and he couldn't walk up the stairs. So I knew something was up, man. And less than a month and a half later, my dad died. So you can imagine, as a 24-year-old, I think I was 24, maybe 23. I'm no longer a football player. I've lost 120 pounds. I'm thinking I'm starting a new gig at a job, and then I lose my dad. And so it was just this big transition period of time to say, who do you want to be? What foundation do you want to lay? What decisions are you going to make? And so, I got to Kansas City, did a couple jobs for a couple years, and I just struggled, man. I struggled with the idea that I'm just going to get paid the same amount no matter what the effort I put in. And so I found myself in some sales jobs, did pretty well. Then I leveled up, I thought, and went to a W-2 plus commission, and met my wife, and we were married and just moved into a house, and they brought a private equity company on and fired everybody, right? And so, in 2018, my wife looked at me in the eyes, and she said something that changed everything. She said, bet on yourself. And so that's when I said, I'm no longer going to be, a W-2 employee. And so I started a sales consulting company as a 25, 26-year-old. I grabbed Inc.'s fastest 5,000 growing companies list, and I call the first 2,500 of them, and I land 3 full-time clients. And mind you, back, when I was working, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I've been working for 21 years now. So 21 years ago, I was getting paid $5.15 an hour, and like 25 cents a bale to bale hay. Right. So wow. I get these guys to pay me $250 an hour, right? Doing what? I don't know. I said, what do you need? I'm building CRM systems. I'm making cold calls. I'm flying to Orlando, Florida, pitching their products, training their salespeople. But at the same time, I had a buddy that was helping me do some live-in flips. And he said, look, I just landed a $50 million fund that's buying houses in Kansas City. My head of acquisitions just left. And I said, well, I'm your guy. So I got licensed, and I start doing 12 transactions per month. I'm walking through 3 feet of snow in boots. By the way, you need to get the right boots if you're doing that. I'm handing out flyers at people's houses, finding real estate deals while anybody else is not willing to do it. Looking at 15 to 20 houses per day, estimating all the rehabs, making offers 7 days, cash at 40% off of the price, right? We end up doing 265 homes in like 15 months, right? So it was very successful. And that fund has done really, really well. And that kind of opened my eyes to say, hey, I need to get into the real estate space. I love the idea of them owning real estate. I wanted to learn that. So I started studying, the real estate guys, and I'm looking at the principles of real estate syndication over there. I think it's Sam Freshman, I think. Yeah, that was my Bible. And I started doing some syndication deals on the multifamily and commercial side, moved my license over to commercial brokerage. That was about 6-7 years ago. And now I own Midwest Commercial Real Estate Advisors. We have 5 full-time brokers. We've done, over $400 million of transactions. I'm still an owner in a decent amount of real estate, but primarily focused on, helping sellers dispose of their assets and finding properties for developers and doing a lot of land deals. So, I mean, that's kind of where we're at now, utilizing digital marketing and social media, trying to stay on the cutting edge to do real estate brokerage. And, I think that one thing was interesting that has happened is people started reaching out. Hey, do you have time for me to pick your brain and things like that? And I was doing that. And then I hooked up with one of my good buddies, Tyler Cobble, and I was like, hey, man, we need to do a podcast on this. So we started doing a podcast, right? And then he's like, hey, maybe we should start a group. Maybe somebody would actually find value in this. And so we start a group. And now we've got 20 brokers across the country every Tuesday night that come and learn how to build their businesses. And it keeps me sharp because I've got to be able to deliver content in a clear, concise, and compelling way But additionally, I need to be able to communicate how am I generating traffic outside of just LoopNet and Crexy and the listing platforms to be able to sell real estate. And so that's what I'm doing now. And I'll tell you what, every day is different and it's a challenge and it's exciting, but I wake up pretty inspired, ready to rock and roll. And that's what we're doing now, man.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, and obviously through the characteristics that you described from your early years, it's kind of showcases why you've had so much success thus far. I think, one thing we kind of always see is people who have operated in an athletic competition for a long period of time, in particular if they've gone to the next level. I mean, it's pretty amazing to see the discipline and diligence that they take to whatever endeavor they ultimately apply. And so I think that's something that I'm sure, over time you've dug into the well to get you through some of those early years where you're having to deal with the rejection. You're having to kind of walk through the fire to get to where you want to go. So that's obviously very beneficial. Now, one of the things that I'm kind of curious about is you described yourself as a person who first got into the real estate space via your buddy who had a fund, and you were looking at properties, kind of estimating what the rehab cost would be, trying to get them at the lowest price possible, then ultimately getting them flipped over. What was the decision to jump into to commercial real estate brokerage? Because I mean, it seems like that although there's some similarities in the way that you assess property values, there's obviously some distinction as well between the two. So I'm kind of curious as to what the decision was to make that jump.
Yeah, I mean, it was two things really. One, I saw some, the challenges of managing a 200 plus unit single family home fund, right? Because we did all of the renovations, we did all the property management, and so I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly on that front. And I just thought that, hey, look, if I'm going to build a career in this industry, likely should be in commercial and multifamily instead of trying to do single family. And so that was probably the biggest component of it. But also, I think that I've always been infatuated with large buildings and who owns and how do those deals come out of the ground? How do you decide what to build where? Zoning code, land use, all of those things were very, interesting to me. I took a class in one of my master's programs, and it was about planning and zoning, and I loved it. I thought it was really cool on how cities look at their topography and where to put things and how they make those decisions, and then public and private partnerships. So I think there was just so many different avenues to be able to go in the commercial and the multifamily sector. And then what I have learned now is that, like, people ask me, like, what do you do? And it's like, not really brokerage. Sure, that's a component, but it's like, I'm actually taking all of this experience and knowledge and relationships, connecting the dots, and then making, opportunities for people. And it's sometimes brokerage, but I'll tell you, I mean, this year alone, there's been so many different things in regards to like learning about data centers and learning about flex industrial and how to lease properties up correctly. And, looking how archaic leasing is and bringing marketing into that process. Right. And so I'm finding the business acumen to be able to be, kind of, cross-pollinated into the brokerage side. And I don't see that necessarily in the single family home world. And so those were the two reasons that I kind of decided to get into the more of the commercial and industrial and multifamily space, because I just think there's so many different opportunities. And you look at like single family home and it's like, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to work with investors. I'm going to work with, retail clients. So, well, I mean, take an office building, for example. I mean, you can be the land person that goes and finds it. You can be the developer to build it. You can be the person who leases it up, finances it, manages it. There's so many different components just to think about one asset class on how you could get involved in that. And that was very intriguing to me.
Yeah, and to your point regarding all those different facets, in order for you to properly advise your clients, you have to understand, at least at a high level, how all these pieces fit together. At least if you're going to advise them to a high level. So to your point, I mean, it requires a little bit more in-depth understanding of all these different processes to make sure you're properly advising your clients. So one thing that I find fascinating, and this is what I get excited about, is the creation of processes to support your existing business and us ultimately amplify what you're trying to do on a grand scale. You talked about the commercial real estate industry. Historically, it's been somewhat of a gate-kept industry. And from a technological advancement standpoint, it's been one that has not adopted technology as readily. Now I will say this, I've seen much more interest in trying to move into a direction that other industries have taken. But again, I think that regarding, people's activity locally, I can tell you right now, at least in my local market, I feel like there's a lot less push towards that area of improving one's business. And you've done a phenomenal job of utilizing all of these different tools and trying to create ways so that you can streamline processes and ultimately deliver a better product and service to your clients. So I wanted to kind of dive into kind of the nuances of how you've been able to do that such that you ultimately are able to scale your operations. So,
Yeah.
to start out, what was the impetus for wanting to do that? And maybe we can dive into some of the more nuanced descriptions thereafter.
Well, I think that like what clients are after is results.
Mhm.
And two things that I've always thought was really interesting is like John Wooden said, be quick, but don't hurry.
Mm.
And to be quick, you need to have data, you need to have a process and manpower or woman power. And now through technology and these specific systems, a lot of that is removed, right? So I have managed many people in the past, and it is a difficult proposition to be a manager to get people to, operate at the speed that you want them to. But now I have a lot of tasks that can get done, without manual input. So as long as I know how to prompt a specific software system or a system. And so I think speed of execution wins. And like, trying to figure out, a broker opinion of value now, that would maybe take a week or 2 weeks and maybe a month, previously. Well, I take all the data that I have had, and been watching and tracking for the last 7, 8, 9 years. I take that. I use the market data that is current. I can blend the two now and have a supercomputer give me insights and analysis on it. I mean, that is unbelievable, right? And not only that, after it sends me an output, I then utilize that output into a different system that creates a visual appealing way to actually consume that information. And that can be done in less than 3 hours if you have dedicated time. So it's fascinating to me to be able to turn around. I think I sent 2 broker opinion of values out yesterday, complex deals that I felt very confident about. I think the owners were like, man, we're probably going to get this back in a month. It was less than 48 hours that I turned this around to them. That ended up being, it was a 2-acre deal, ended up turning into a 43-acre deal because of the value that I brought. And this is for a land deal, right?
Mhm.
And so I showed them, because of AI, I showed them, if you are able to do the entitlements on this land, here is an appraisal, right? I have an appraisal from a recent deal. So I upload that to the AI as well. And it's reviewing, appraiser, I guess, confirmed values and or standards to say, hey, here's the entitlement premium that you can get depending on if you have a special use permit or if you have just the zoning in place or if you actually have a preliminary site plan approved from the city. Like, I've never seen that in a broker opinion of value. And I turned that around in less than 48 hours to that client, which turned a 2-acre deal into a 43-acre deal. So it would have been a $300,000 deal is now a $5.2 million deal, right? That is just a one use case that I am seeing. So speed of execution is absolutely critical in this business. So be quick, but don't hurry. And now I don't have to hurry because I'm already quick on the analysis side. And I have so many different tools to be able to analyze that. And then sending that off to the marketing team used to take 7 days to get back. We have revisions. It's just a broken process. I'm sitting here chatting with an AI bot that is making the updates in real time, and it looks like a professional deal that CBRE or JLL spent probably $10,000 and 50 hours on, and it looks very similar. And that's just kind of mind blowing to me to be able to produce that. So clients are after results and they're after speed. So, if I can provide those two things, I think all the barriers from this being a good old buddies, network or, can't break in, if you're providing speed and results and opportunities, then you're going to get noticed. And I think those are 3 things that I've been trying to really focus on and bring to my clients.
That's amazing. And some of those systems you described, I mean, they're out there. I mean, there's, I think one probably is that you're referring to as Gamma. It's a presentation generator that is pretty powerful. It's a pretty amazing thing. I actually did a similar thing. I used the SAP software to be able to create a comprehensive property management plan for a proposed, property that we're looking to potentially manage for a client there after he retires. And so that sort of thing can be done in real time. Now, one thing I'm curious about is, let's talk a little bit about, because I think that the core group of people that listen to this podcast are those that are somewhat earlier in their career.
Yeah.
When you look at the demographics of the actual podcast, it tends to skew between the ages of 25 and 34. And I think part of the reason for that is because, number one, people of that age range are the ones who typically listen to podcasts. But also, two, is that we tend to try to create content and value for people who are looking to scale to that next level. So, let's talk a little bit about maybe when you first got the itch to start your own thing. And then from there, what were some of the steps you took to get to where you are at today, where you guys have done $400+ million in brokerage deals? You guys have been involved on the real estate acquisition side. It seems like you have your own real estate that you own, which is something that I constantly press people that are in brokerage. I think you become, number one, it's a wealth building tool, but number two, I think you truly become a better broker when you own your own real estate, because you understand some of the nuances involved with running and operating the asset, and you could properly advise your clients to then, obviously help them in whatever, capacity that they need help in. And so, I guess let's dive into your decision to start, your Midwest brokerage, and then also, how did you structure the starting point so that you could really springboard to the future?
Yeah. I had the opportunity to really kind of interview with all the large brokerages and brokerages that were wanting to come to Kansas City. And, I think that they all have a good, national platform. I think there's importance to that, but just being the entrepreneur that I am, I just felt like I was able to create a value proposition without any guardrails that maybe isn't in the marketplace right now. And, I think that's really important. And so I was able to, find a partner who does close to $1 billion in residential real estate on a regular basis, mostly on new homes. So my thesis was that if I understand where the new rooftops are going, I can probably get a pretty good opinion of where commerce is flowing. And so now I have insight into where 45 new home communities are moving towards, because I was getting calls and folks were like, hey, we're doing site selection. We want to be in this corridor. Where should we, or where should else we be focused at, right? And it was just giving them a lot of like adjectives instead of statistics, and so have that opportunity. But like for me, I think there's a couple things that newer folks getting into this industry is, need to keep in mind. And number one is, get your mind and your money right. There's a quote from Alex Hormozy that I just love, and it's just like, says something around the lines of like, you don't become confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror. I have tried. I still try to do it on a regular basis. You build confidence by stacking undeniable proof that who you are who you say that you are, right? And I think that is so important. It's like, do you keep the promises that you make to yourself, right? So you have to have a resolve in this business to never quit, and you got to treat this like a long-term commitment and not a side hustle, right? You got to burn the boats. That's what I always like to say. You got to burn the boats, right? I think people need to probably save close to 12 months to expenses, right? Not 6, but 12. Your first check may not come for 9 months. And then you have to figure out like your why. Are you escaping something, or are you building something? So vision, really sustains you as an individual when your results don't, because I had to kind of detach my self-worth as an achievement-based love. An achiever is my top talent from Strength Finders. Like, it's been a long journey. I'm still trying to do this, but detaching my self-worth from the results that I get, and instead attaching to the activity and the work that I'm putting in, right? So I think that's number one, is getting your mindset and your money right. And then I always try to consult folks on like number two is pick a niche and master your market. And this was really instigated by conversation that I had with Bob Knackle, and we both know Bob. He's one of the most successful real estate brokers of all time. But like knowing your market and knowing your numbers, like how many deals are traded, what's active on the market. I mean, if you ask those questions to most brokers, they don't know. So just one way to stand out, instead of answering in adjectives, is answering in statistics, will put you in the top 1% in your industry. And so I talk a lot about that, as well as choosing one asset class, and I think I made maybe the mistake of starting with both multifamily and triple net, but I was focused really on 1031 exchange investors. And so I think it was a benefit, because if we couldn't find a multifamily deal that made sense, there was a lot of folks that wanted something that was a little easier to manage. And so we would do triple net lease deals. But if I had to kind of tell somebody right now, is choose one asset class, and really be a master on that, and research your market daily, right? Know every comp, cap rate, lease term, owner. 30 minutes a day really builds that muscles that other people don't. And then track everything on a monthly basis. Make your intel your superpower. Be the broker that knows more, not just talks louder, right? And so those are kind of step 1 and 2. And then, I mean, tangible things like going in and building your database and then working that database, right? And I mean, it's like Bob always says, this is not a very complex business, but it is hard to do on a regular basis, right? But like, you got to create that list of every single owner. If they own in your niche, they should be in your CRM. Call them all, right? Then call them again and again. Most brokers quit, after 500 calls. Dude, I was making 2,000 calls a week, when I was getting started, right? So it's like, what are you willing to do? Because people aren't willing to pick up the phone because they have some sort of rejection, scarcity of rejection, right? Well, it's like what MCH strategic data taught me was, they're not saying no to me personally. They're saying no to the offer that I'm making. So I need to make a better offer, or I need to ask better questions. And I try to set 5 meetings a week, coffee, property tours, in-person meetings, Zoom meetings. I need 5 meetings a week, right? And I'm trying to do that on a regular basis and add value every single time. I'm not just pitching, I'm educating, right? It's like, every deal that we launch has a macro market report. It has a micro market report. It has the frequently asked questions. It has all, and I use Gamma to create those flyers, right? It's like, hey, here's the things that people are asking. Here's the information, right? And so I'm trying to get ahead of some of those questions that might be coming up. I'm educating, I'm advising, I'm solving. And then you got to play the long game, man. I mean, this is a relationship business. Every call, every meeting, it's a brick in the foundation of your brand, right? And that's a whole nother probably topic, is brand building, right? Is like, can you get your voice out there in the right way? But I think that comes naturally as you're starting to do these fundamentals. You can start to say, here's what I'm doing on a regular basis. Here are the results that I've had. Here are what I'm seeing as market trends. You can start to build that brand as you're doing the work. I think a lot of people try to start brand first, and they have nothing really of value to say. I always say, hey, go take a massive strategic action and then just post about what you're doing on a regular basis. That's going to elevate you in a faster timeline and get you paid faster than just trying to be a social media, thought leader or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think it kind of goes back to that original point that you're making about consistency. There was this book that kind of changed the way that I viewed my life when I was back when I was 24. My previous career, I was in software and engineering. And at the time, I was working in San Juan, Puerto Rico on a big tech software project. And, you'd think I have it made. I had a, high profile job. I was making a good amount of money. My apartment was on the beach, but inside I felt lost and confused, and I just didn't feel fulfilled. I felt like I was just kind of slogging every day, and it didn't feel like I had a purpose. And then I read this book called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy that really changed the way that I viewed my life. Is that, dude, all it takes is small, positive, consistent action every single day, and you start achieving so many things that you would never have thought you could have achieved. Like you look at all these people that are doing huge things in their life, and it's really hard to create that linear path to where they've gotten to. But when you really think about it, it's like, if you just approach every day as, hey, today I'm going to make 100 calls, or today I'm going to make 50 calls, or today I'm going to schedule a meeting, and you just focus in on that goal every single day for a long time, not just a few months. It takes years.
Yeah.
You look back after 5 years, and I guarantee you that if you take that approach, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And you'll and maybe new opportunities present themselves, and then your life shifts in a different direction that you never would have thought possible. But that's because of your willingness to take that activity and move forward in that direction. So no, I really appreciate the insight there, because I think it's important for people to kind of reinforce that, especially as they start advancing in their career, because I feel like people can sometimes get in a rut and not really think about why they're doing it in the first place. So definitely insightful there.
Yeah.
So regarding your decision to now want to get into the mentorship space, how has that process unfolded, and what have you learned from that experience? Because it's one thing to be an individual contributor, but as you start to scale and manage and grow other people, that's another layer of complexity that adds to your business. I'm kind of curious about how you've been able to scale and operate in that capacity as well.
Yeah, great question. I frankly, it was out of necessity. I was taking time during work days to do trainings, to do mentorship. And I'm like, man, like this is the time that I need to be executing my work. Right. And so I was like, I got to push this to a time that's, yes, I have to give away a little bit from my family. I've got a very supportive wife. We've got 3 kids, 6 and under. So I get it all. Right. But like I needed to move that to a period of time where I wasn't out trying to generate revenue, or my brokers weren't generating revenue. So we had this idea of saying, okay, we're going to do it, after hours on Tuesdays. And can you commit? Are you willing to put the time in on a Tuesday afternoon after you've had a long day, right? Tuesdays for football were always, either the 2-a-days or the full pad practice. I mean, it was the grind day, right? I mean, I put 16, 17 hours in still every Tuesday right now, because that's when we have our 2-hour, consulting calls every single week. And I think that, at first it was just out of necessity. And then we made a couple posts about it. Some folks reached out and said, hey, can we be a part of this thing? And I was like, yeah, sure. Let's do it, and now we have a full curriculum. We have over, I don't know, 50 sessions, I've recorded. We have all these documents that are putting in processes in place. It's a recruitment tool for new brokers who want to join, the team. Like you get access to this mastermind of, 20 people across the country doing deals, bringing deals, underwriting deals. Deals have been made inside of the group now, right? I have a client need. They're willing to go nationally. Okay, great. We got folks in Denver, Colorado, in Atlanta, Georgia, in Nashville, Tennessee, in, Indianapolis. We got them all over the country. And so now it's kind of created this deal flow also that has been going on. But the biggest, I think, opportunity is, people being vulnerable and bringing their challenges that they're seeing, like, hey, Logan, I see that you're, really rocking it with social media and all these different things, but I don't know what to post. Okay. Well, let's dive into that. Let's figure out how to get a strategy in place. I had a guy, last night or Tuesday night say, hey, I don't know how to build a CRM database. All right. Well, in October of last year, we spent 2 hours figuring out how to pull that information. And if you don't have access to that information, going and building that database off of Fiverr and Fiverr.com to be able to build this database so you have contact information, right? And so it's like, man, I just solved that problem for that individual. That's been a challenge for them because they were thinking about what CRM system do I need? And they didn't have the information to put into a CRM system. We need to back up and say, hey, who are you calling? Why are you calling them? He's like, well, I'm industrial, office, and flex. And I'm like, well, those are 3 different users, 3 different investor, avatars. What are you going to be saying to each one? We need to sub-segment these out, right? And we try to help people find their lucrative niche. So, for example, if you're doing multifamily in Indianapolis, we need to go back and we need to say, hey, for the past 2 years, how many deals have traded? What was the volume? How many brokers have been active in that space? And if it's super competitive, should you be trying to go into that red ocean, or should you try to find a blue ocean strategy and focus on a different asset type? And so that's now a data-based type of decision instead of like, well, I just like multifamily. Well, okay, then you're going to be competing against 47 other brokers that are all doing 2 deals per year. Why not try to do, retail shopping centers where there's, 5 brokers doing 10 deals per year? Probably could take some more market share from that location, right? So I think that that's really important. And it's just really been exciting and inspiring to see people start with no track record, with no deals done. And now I'm watching on LinkedIn, these individuals ringing the gongs and seeing their deals get done, right? And I mean, we had a guy, 2 weeks ago who was on the call and he was live negotiating his fee, right? We always get our fees negotiated on, right? It's like, well, buyer doesn't want to pay it. Seller's only willing to pay this. I added this much value. And, we were able to help him while he was negotiating that live get the fee that he deserved live using principles from Never Split the Difference and experience from 18 other people that were on that call. That's powerful. And so then we break those folks out into smaller accountability pods, and they have their own calls talking about what they're going through and their challenges, or don't know how to underwrite this deal. And they can break off and have those individual, meetings and build relationships as well. So it's just been this, organic thing that has really taken shape, and we're excited about the growth of it, but don't really care to grow it very fast because, it takes a lot of time. And I love the one-on-one interactions that we're having.
Yeah, and I think that's where the true value lies, is your ability to kind of connect with that small group of people and have those accountability pods where each individual has an opportunity to connect with other people in other parts of the country. And there's not probably a concern about sharing information because you're not a local broker to our market and you maybe aren't competing with one another. So I could see a lot of value being exchanged in that capacity. So,
Absolutely.
you alluded to something which is kind of interesting, which is something that has become more prevalent, especially over the last decade or so. And that is, creating social media presence. Now, I think you and I both agree that it's an important to think about, but it should not be the sole focus of your business, because at the end of the day, you need to be able to generate opportunity. That's the number one, the number one activity per day should be trying to get that meeting, to essentially try to find an opportunity that ultimately you can convert into revenue. But I think it is important to think about you're building your presence and your brand strategically over a period of time. So maybe talk a little bit about, how you've been able to do that, because now you've got, tons of followers on LinkedIn. You've got a big, following of people all across the country that know what you do. Obviously, it's probably helped you in your efforts to try to start the group and then ultimately have people join. So I'm kind of curious about, how you've been able to, structure your media around creating that strong presence.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I started a monthly newsletter, 7 or 8 years ago, right? I just started capturing emails. Everybody that you're emailing back and forth, I'm sending them a link to get the monthly newsletter. And I just showcased deals. I was marketing my insights. I was showing the expertise, right? The deals that were getting done, any opportunities that we had. So that's been 7 or 8 years worth of newsletters just being sent out. And yes, the brands have changed, but the names have not. And the insights that we try to showcase have not either. But I think that's really important, is like, you need to get some sort of system in place where all of the individuals that you're talking to are communicated to you from you on a regular basis. And LinkedIn's a great place to do that now with their newsletter features and all these things too. But you need to get the audience off of LinkedIn onto your own platforms, right? And having those one-on-one kind of scenarios. But like on LinkedIn, you just tell the truth. You share the grind. You position yourself as the go-to broker in your niche. What I try to think about is like when that, when the plumbing breaks, you go to the refrigerator and there's a magnet for the plumber that you need to call, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if a multifamily owner says, man, I need to sell, are you on that refrigerator magnet? And if you're not, how do you become that, right? And so I think that's adding the value, that's creating the insights, and it's sharing it on a regular basis. And like, I started posting on LinkedIn because I went on a Yona Weiss, 10-day challenge 5, 6, 7 years ago. I don't remember. And I was like, well, that was 10 days, but why would I stop? So I just continued to add, value, try to on a regular basis. I think you need to get some personal expertise in there. You need to share some of your personal story. People really resonate with that. I think people do business with people, not just brands. Mm-hmm. And this was really driven home for me when Knackle told me, like, look, when I was fired from JLL, I was in the map room later that afternoon making calls. And he said, the name on the front of the jersey changed, but the name on the back did not. And that was just so prevalent for me to understand. It was like, okay, well, if you're still got the relationships and you still have all the contact information, then you can just move where you need to go. And if anything happens, you still have your information. And I think the other thing is like, I try to launch property campaigns. I try to productize the offering in a way that's different from everybody else's out there. So I'm trying to show the sellers what it looks like to market it and not just list, right? I think there's a big difference between that. And now that I have been so focused on building that brand, I can send owners reports to say, hey, we went through the spotlight strategy on your project. For the last 9 days, Crexy and LoopNet have generated around 4,000 views on your property. On Monday, we put an educational post about the asset class with links to the listing and the event that was later that afternoon in a post. That post got 20,000 views, 35% of them in the real estate industry. I can show you the market statistics and the breakdowns of that. That drove another 15 people to come watch the live presentation that's now already been watched 4 or 5 hours after that's done. And that is now live on YouTube and on LinkedIn. And so in 24 hours, I was able to generate around 30,000 impressions and views on your deal. And then that allowed me to have this many conversations. That's powerful. And that's a unique value proposition out there that people you can create if you dedicate building that platform either on LinkedIn, or Tyler Cobble has done it on YouTube tremendously, right? I mean, he can build. Crazy. Yeah, it's unbelievable, right? I mean, he sent me a stat the other day. His content has been watched on YouTube for like 37 years in cumulatively. Yeah. That's wild, right? So when he has a new project, all he needs to do is do a video on it, and it's marketed to more people than the listing platforms could ever reach. So I think that's really an interesting thing to be thinking about. And it's just now probably 7-8 years that I've had actual ability to monetize that following, right? And I don't sell anything like newsletters or advertisements or anything like that, but I do sell the fact that, hey, I can bring your property to market and get 30,000 views in about 14 days on top of what we're going to get on the listing platforms, right? And that is a unique value proposition that I think everyone should be focused on trying to do, and you can build that through social media.
That's great. That's amazing insight. And to your point, what you're doing is you're creating a kind of almost an annuity in the sense that you're creating your recognition in the marketplace as someone who knows what they're doing, who has a really large following, and you're using those insights that you capture to create a value proposition to your ultimate clients, and being able to say, hey, here's the results that we had for a previous listing where we were able to sell. We listed at this price. It achieved 105% of what the ultimate list price was. And you can track and create these success stories that you ultimately can sell going forward to prospective clients. So that's great. And I appreciate the fact, again, it kind of goes back to this recurring theme of consistency. It's not something that happens overnight, but if you're consistent about the way that you present the information that you're gathering, if you document the way that you're operating within the business, if you continually share value over years, it really does. It's really it's a multi-year type of approach. It will pay off in the end. I mean, I think I started my YouTube channel back in 2020. Yeah. And now we're pushing 5,000 subscribers, and we've got well over 10,000 on LinkedIn, and we've been able to, I've generated several large deals off LinkedIn. I got a 70,000 square foot industrial listing from LinkedIn here in our local market. And that was from an owner who had been following me for a while, who ultimately saw what I was able to provide as far as value, reached out to me directly on the platform, and ultimately got to the point where I was able to represent her to sell their building and ultimately buy another building just around the corner next to their major facility. And again, reiterating the fact that you can't predict where it's going to come from, but it will eventually manifest itself if you continue to put yourself out there over a longer period of time. And it's just one of the tools in the toolkit to be able to do that.
That's exactly right. And that's I've got 10 case studies of similar scenarios just like that, right? And it could be a powerful tool. So one thing that we try to teach is, like, you need to be focused on inbound and outbound, but like outbound has to start first. Yeah. And then you need to be working on telling your story and your success and the challenges to create that inbound. And at some point, the tipping point will come, right? I'm like, people are like, hey, I see all these posts about made 200 cold calls a day. That's great. I love it. I get it. And I still do it. But like, I have had to make, basically virtually zero cold calls this year. And we have active either 20 deals listed or under contract because of the value that we have been providing for the last 7 to 8 years. So that tipping point has now moved to say, okay, now we have inbound leads that we can work, but it didn't just happen overnight.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, even regarding cold calls, they don't stay cold calls if you build those relationships with people. That's right. It becomes they know you. They see you in the marketplace. They see the value you're providing. And even if they themselves have another broker, or maybe they're not interested in using your services at the time, you better believe that they're seeing you operate in the business. And if you decide to give them a call one day, the likelihood of them taking your call is a lot higher. And the likelihood of them also, being willing to at least have a conversation with you is also higher. So it's one of those things that I think it's, kind of important to reiterate that cold calls don't stay cold forever if you're being deliberate about the way you approach the process. So,
absolutely. And I think that a book that I read, love him or hate him, Grant Cardone has omnipresence, right?
100%.
And 10X rule talks about omnipresence, and, he's like, man, I'm emailing people, 4 times a day. If you don't want to be on the list, get off, but I'm omnipresent, right? There's been numerous occasions where people are like, man, you're everywhere. And I'm like, really? Like, where are you seeing me everywhere? Because but that's great, right? That's the omnipresence that you want, because then you can monetize that I'm everywhere to, hey, I'm everywhere and I do this. So it's just very valuable. So I took that to heart reading 10X rule and Grant Cardone's omnipresence principle. I think it's a fascinating one.
Definitely. Well, no, I appreciate all the insight you've shared thus far. So, regarding our discussion, I just wanted to ask maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll open up to Q&A for those of you who are watching live. Regarding different resources, or we've kind of talked about several books that have inspired you. We've touched on some other things that you've also leveraged in order to advance your cause and your business. What are some of the best resources that you found for those individuals who are kind of like early in their career to mid in their career to kind of help them take the next step?
Yeah. Well, I mean, reps, I think, is so important. So, like, one thing I'll say is, like, everybody wants a book, right? And that's good. That's important. But, like, CCIM, go get your reps over there, right? Like, go get your education wherever you need to get it from. YouTube, CCIM, books, that's fine. But then once you decide this is what I'm going to focus on, there are listed properties out there that you can get reps on, right? And if you're a broker and you say, I'm not a numbers person, then you need to find one, because you have to understand those fundamentals. And so, like, I'm saying to people that get her started, it's like, if you're focused on flex industrial in Kansas City, I need you to pull every single listing that's out there that's an investment sale, and we need to do an underwriting on every single deal. Tell me why the deal is good, why it's bad, and what price you think it can trade at, right? Like, do that. Like, that's a perfect spot to start. You're going to have so many questions that come. I could give you a playbook and I could tell you exactly what questions are going to come up. But if you go find those yourself, it's going to hit home, right? And so I think just getting those reps in. Same thing with, making calls. It's like, hey, you got to get on the phone at some point to start calling these property owners. What are you going to say? Do you have their contact information? And what value are you bringing? How are you going to start that conversation? So let's get 15, 20, 25 of those reps in. Let's get 5, 10 reps of underwriting per weekend. And then let's reevaluate in 4 weeks and see where you're at. What are you challenged with? What problems are you having? Like, that is a perfect place to get started. The other thing I would say is just, like, get around people and be willing to put the work in. And I think Sean Ward talks about this a lot. It's like, on their podcast. I'm sure Justin's in your network, or your network.
Justin Ryder, yeah, he's in Lexington, just about an hour away from me.
Yeah,
so we run into each other periodically.
Yeah, I love those guys and listening to them and their stories as well. But I think one thing they both would say is, and other people would say is, like, you catch what you're close to, right? And so, like, if you're around people that are doing deals, they're making calls, they're having meetings, find a way to get yourself in there and add a ton of value for a long period of time. And you'll start getting, more and more opportunities to do your own deals, and you'll learn from that as well. So 2 things: get the reps in and get around people doing it. And that's the most, I think, successful route to take. I didn't take that route. But I am also, and Malcolm Gladwell has a little bit of a book on this, called Outliers, right? And outlier, like, I think I'm an outlier, and I'm not, like, trying to toot my own horn at all, but, like, people would say, oh man, he's an extrovert. I'm not. I'm actually an ambivert. Like, I like being by myself thinking, and then I go execute. I don't like to be not annoyed, but I don't like to be moved off of my agenda, right? And so, like, you could say, hey, you're 335 pounds now. I need you to be 220 pounds at 13% body fat. I'm going to go find a plan, and I'm going to wake up every single day to do it until I'm there. Like, that's just achiever mindset, individualization, competition. It's all ingrained in me and what I have seen in my life. Not everybody is wired that way. So when I got started, I really wasn't around people doing those deals. And I think it actually benefited me because I didn't have any bad habits or any ways to think about doing it. I was just kind of bringing my other business acumen into this industry to say, well, I'm sure that's the way it's been done for 25, 50 years, but I think there's a better way to try to do that, right? So my advice is to try to get around people doing those types of deals that you want to be focused on.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the people you surround yourself with are the people that ultimately can, that showcase what you can ultimately become. So I think that the fact that you guys are doing that mentorship is huge. And I'm sure at some point in the future, if it does become available again where people can join, I'm sure that people are going to have interest. And if there is a link, I'm happy to, include it in the show notes because I think it will be of value to a lot of people. So,
yeah.
Regarding the rest of this, I was just going to give an opportunity for the rest of the audience to ask any type of questions they may have. So feel free to type away in the chat box if you guys have interest. So to start out, let's go ahead. Cam asks, new broker here. What was your strategy to get to 2K calls a week?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, you have to have the information, right? So you got to build that database. So going back to building that database, you got to create the list of every owner, or you join a firm that has that database already built, right? And then you say, hey, who are the people that you can't get a hold of and you don't want to call, and then take that on, right? So you plan the work and then you work the plan. There's really no strategy to say, hey, other than time blocking to say, okay, well, this is how many calls you should make, right? I think that my metric that I'm trying to focus on every single week is how many meaningful conversations did I have, right? And I'm trying to have 5 to 6 meaningful conversations. And I define that for myself as, is this a property owner? Is this investor that I can do business with in the next 3 months? And there has been a buying or selling signal, right? So like that's really important for me to track and to understand, right? And then how many profit producing revenue generating meetings am I having per week? Well, I'm having around 12 to 13 of those per week, and I'm averaging around 4.7 meaningful conversations per day. Okay, so find those KPIs that are important that move your business forward, and those are the two that move mine forward. And then I have to reverse engineer to say how many calls, how many contacts, how many posts, how much activity is going to take to get to that, lead that lagging indicator, right? And so I'm looking at leading indicators and lagging indicators, but there is no strategy to actually just sit down and pick up the phone. It is a muscle. And there's some great resources out there in regards to being able to be better on the phones and things like that. I love the NEPQ framework. I think it's called Neuro Emotional Persuasive Questioning. I think it's really good. And I think it's different. And I think it can maybe be an outlier. And they have great resources. You can go over to their site and find that. But that and Never Split the Difference are kind of my two frameworks that I use when I'm trying to make contact with somebody or I'm training somebody on making sales calls. So just plan the work and then work the plan.
That's amazing. Great advice, really. And out of curiosity, while we wait for some questions to come in, was there a particular topic or question maybe that you wish that I would have asked you that maybe we didn't get a chance to discuss thus far? Just always like to ask that at the end of the podcast episode.
Yeah, 5 feet from gold.
5 feet from gold. I'd like that.
5 feet from gold, guys.
Yeah.
Go find the story. That is this industry at its heart. It's like there's so many different stories of people working for 12 months, 9 months, 10 months, 2 years, and then saying, well, haven't done anything, haven't made what I need, so I'm going to leave. And then those people they were working call the brokerage back and say, hey, is Johnny around? Johnny's not at the brokerage, but what you got? Well, I need to list this $24 million portfolio. So it's like, just keep at it, right? And it's 5 feet from gold because you don't want to stop 5 feet from that gold mine. And I think that's really important. And so that's why I think number one is get your money right, get your mindset right. But this can be a very lucrative business. It's an exciting one for sure, but you don't want to stop right before you hit the gold mine.
Great advice, really. All right. Well, it looks like you've answered all the questions thus far. Logan, really thankful for the opportunity to sit down with you today and talk. I think it's going to be of a lot of value to the audience. And obviously, I'm looking forward to potentially keeping in touch in the future. And
Yeah.
who knows if there's not an opportunity to collaborate in some way. Would really like that. If people want to learn more about you, to get in touch with you, if they haven't already connected with you in some capacity, what's the best way to do that?
Yep. I mean, LinkedIn is a great spot. So if you're on LinkedIn, Logan Freeman, the Kansas City commercial real estate guy, you'll see me post there daily, literally 7 days a week, sometimes twice a day. Trying to get away from that because I don't think it's helping. So one time a day, though, I am there. It is me posting. It is me in the DMs. It is me commenting on your stuff. I'm kind of obsessed with it. People are like, well, what do you do on your free time? Well, I get my news from LinkedIn, and I comment on people's stuff, and I send messages in LinkedIn, and it's because I've seen the benefits of it. So you can find me on LinkedIn. If you guys are in the Midwest looking for real estate, just specifically in Kansas and Missouri, mwcreadvisors.com. That's on my LinkedIn as well, though. You can find everything there.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to include that in the show notes. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube, go ahead in the description and you'll be able to access those links. And if you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, again, it'll be in the description as well. So Logan, love it. Thank you so much for your time. It was really, really insightful, and I'm really looking forward to the feedback that we receive from this podcast. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It makes a huge impact on our ability to reach a broader audience. Along with that, if you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. It does make a huge impact on our ability to reach a broader audience, and we obviously greatly appreciate the support. So thanks again so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.